Welcome to part 2 of From Plein Air to the Studio number 2. And basically what we're going to do is I want to add more information to this painting. I want to give it some life. I want the viewer to look at this painting as if they're looking through a window and they're seeing the world the way I want them to see it. So we're going to do that with this painting. So hey everybody, I'm Ken Brant and I'm an artist. So basically what I mean by putting more information into this painting, it's still lacking some, I don't want to say life, but I think a better word would be essence. So it's lacking some essence. There needs to be more interest. The hills in the background, they're kind of dull. The houses, especially to the left, not a lot going on there. And the water I remember when we were there was a lot more happening in the water. There's a lot of rocks and things going on in there. The grass needs more interest. Basically the whole thing, it just still needs more information. And I don't want to take away from the focal point by adding a lot of detail to it. I just want to put more life into this painting. So that's what we're going to do. Welcome to part 2 of From Plein Air to the Studio of part 2 of number 2. And if you watched part 1 and you're now watching part 2, I want to thank you for staying with me on this particular painting. And I don't know if paintings, if any of the paintings that I'll be doing after this will be taking as long as this one did. This painting was particularly, I want to say, complicated in the way that, it had a lot of little buildings in it, and there was just a lot of information on this particular scene. And it was a very aggressive scene to take on as a plein air study. You'll notice it isn't necessarily true, but you will notice for most part when people do a plein air, they do a landscape scene. It's usually pretty sparse of buildings and a lot of things within nature. Like there wouldn't be like a ton of logs and branches and twigs that you would have, or people or vehicles. Usually it's an open area, not a lot of information on there, and most artists concentrate on the composition and the shapes of what it is that they're seeing in front of them. That's what drew their interest. And in this particular case, that was not what I did. You'll see here that there's a lot here, a lot of little buildings, and my biggest decision when I started this painting was how much of those buildings did I want to, close in on? Did I want to get a lot of the buildings? Did I want to just concentrate on, one or two and do like a really up close? But we were pretty far from this particular scene. I mean, I could have walked up a lot closer, but the scene that I saw, I felt that I was going to be able to draw out the focal point as the tower and that bridge, and I feel like I successfully accomplished that. So what you'll see I'm doing here is I'm adding more purple to those mountains in the background. There was the more I kept looking at it, the more I kept thinking I really needed to set those back and put a lot of atmosphere between myself and those mountains. So I added a lot more purple, and I will do the same for the mountains on the left as well. Even though those are slightly closer, I still added a little bit more purple in there, and made the I don't want to say texture, because I didn't actually make any texture with the paint itself. It's not like an impasto type painting, but I did use my brush in a way where I could make the forestry, the trees within those mountains, a little bit more interesting. You can see those a little bit more than it's not just a flat color on a mountainous region in the background. And so yeah, I went back over some of the colors on the buildings, and added some more yellows, added some more reds, added some more oranges, and the buildings on the left, the way that sun was hitting that day was they were in the shadow. So I wanted to make sure that that stayed that way, because I really liked the way that that particular scene appealed, compositionally and cosmetically, aesthetically, I guess I should say. Yeah, I like the fact that it was darker on that side, and then a little bit brighter on the other side. In fact, the brightness on the right-hand side is also a little much. So I'll also tone that down as well, because you got to remember, I want my focal point to be that tower near the center and that bridge area. So that's kind of where I want the viewer of this painting to be seeing first. That's the first place I want them to look at. So any areas that are going to be brighter than that will take away from that particular situation. The viewer will be leaning more towards viewing the brighter area. So I gotta, I keep thinking that the right hand side is competing with that. So I will change that and dull that down. And then the next thing that I wanted to concentrate on is the reflections in the water. If you'll notice from the photo that the reflections that I have are not as good as the reflections that are in the photo. So I also wanted to fix that. It's not that I want to make everything exactly the same as what I saw that day. What I do want to do, though, is I want to get a true representation of what it was that I saw. Because there was a lot of things about that particular scene that I really liked, and it also included the reflections. So I will go back and go over those reflections and make those truer to what it is that they're actually reflecting. So here I am working on the area underneath the bridge, adding a little bit more detail to that. Not that it needs the detail, it's just that even though it's not a crisp, actual, detailed information of what was there, there are some windows and some divides between the buildings and that. I needed to at least put those in there to represent that, even though you're not going to, if you stared at that particular spot, it wouldn't be like a super detailed area, like you wouldn't be able to see, each individual window and pane, and that's not the way it's going to be. That's not the way I painted it. Yeah, I wanted to at least make it so when you did look at it, at first glance, that was the information I was going to see. It's like it knows that it sees windows. Your brain kind of fills in those gaps where there isn't exact perfect detail, and that's what I wanted to do there. And here I am adding a little bit more color to the buildings and that, just a little bit more interest to everything in this particular painting. Every time I kind of felt that I was done with this painting, it wasn't necessarily true. I would step back and go, okay, I think I'm done with this, and then I would step back and say, no, there's still more that needs to be done. It's like as soon as I would finish one area, I would notice another area that just needed some more of my attention. And that's kind of how I came across the fact that, I would work on the buildings, and I'd say, okay, I'm done with that, and then I'd see the reflections, and I'd be like in the water, and I'd be like, yeah, it's not truly representing what I am seeing. So in that respect, I did go back and hit those areas. And that's kind of really all you're doing when you bring your painting from the studio, or from the plein air into the studio. That's really all you're doing, is you're enhancing those areas that you didn't quite capture the way you wanted to when you were out in the outdoors painting it in the first place. So, and you have a lot more leeway in the studio, got a lot more time. You can apply a lot of colors and values, and then you can let it sit, and then you can go back over those and change your values. And I had to do that a couple of times. The area in the background in the mountains, I had to go over that several times. I just wasn't happy with the way that looked, so I kept touching that area up. And you'll see here in this particular area here, where I'm putting in the darker greens. And in the photo that I took of that scene that day, those greens are very dark. And what I ended up doing is I ended up changing that a little bit. I actually ended up adding a little bit more purple into there, because that area of the grass is more in the distance from where I was. So I wanted to show a little bit of atmosphere in that area. So I did purple that up a little bit, and you'll see that later. Yeah, it's not something I'm doing with it right now in this particular part of the painting. Yeah, all in all, I want to say this painting in the studio, man, I think I worked on it another full 8 hours, and that would be off and on, going from, like I would sit down for an hour or two, and then I would leave, and then I'd come back and do another hour, and then I would leave, and then the next day I would come back and I'd do maybe, maybe I would just touch it for 15 minutes, work on it, and then I would I did get tired of looking at this scene constantly over and over and over. You got to remember that, I was there, I painted it that day, plein air, and then I bring it back from Italy, and I set it up in the studio, and then I'm working on it more and more and more and more. Eventually, you get, I won't say bored with the picture, but your eyes get tired of looking at the same thing over and over and over. So in between this particular painting, I was doing other paintings in the studio as well. All in all, I want to say I did about 18. I'm pretty sure it was 18, the number. It's 18 paintings in all that we did. So yeah, this was painting. This is only painting number 2 from that trip. So I got 16 more paintings after this one that I'm putting on the easel and working on. Not that I'm not working on all 16 of them, but yeah, paintings 3 and 4, I did have those up in between this one, and I was doing some work on those. And so those are future videos that you'll be seeing. And one of them is a nocturne that I did not videotape me painting plein air, so you're only going to see that as a studio version of that particular painting. But it will be called From Plein Air to Studio for that painting, because that was initially how the painting was done. So here I am working on the water. Now, one thing about water is when the water reflects the sky from above, you'll notice that my water is much bluer, lighter in blue color than the sky is. And that is not actually the way water reflects. When water reflects colors, it usually tends to be darker. The reflection tends to be darker than what it is reflecting. And I'm not going to say that's 100% the case all the time, but I'm going to say 99% of the case. The time that's what the situation is. It will be darker than what it is reflecting. So that blue that you're seeing in the water should actually be a darker value than the sky above it. And except for maybe the area near the very bottom right hand side of that painting, that would probably be a lighter blue because the sky above it is going to be a lighter blue, but it's not a it's part of the sky that you can't even see. It's not even in view in the painting, so I could really make that any color I wanted, but the general rule is it needs to be darker. So I do end up putting a wash over that water to give it that darker blue appearance. And yeah, I was very happy with how it came out. So yeah, that was one of the things I was working on. And you know, all in all, the painting itself, it went very well. And this particular area here that I'm working on, this foreground grass, now in reality there was a path that kind of went down, and it's not in view in the photo. And I was making the decision while I was working on this, just for interest, if I should have put that path in there. I did not. I actually said, nope, what I'll do is I'll add some taller reeds of grass and some bits of flowers that aren't in the photo. It was just something that I felt that would add a little bit more interest to that area. And that's the beautiful part about when you're doing a painting and you bring in the studio and there's something about it that you want to change or maybe add more interest to, then that's where your artistic license comes in, and you can do that. And if you don't like it, you can erase it or go over it. I mean, you're never ever stuck with what you paint. One of the hardest things that artists need to get over is when they paint something like for example, I was painting this painting. A lot of time has gone into this painting. Like I said, you know, we're talking like an hour and a half, 2 hours outdoors in Italy painting this, and then another 8 to 10 hours in the studio. So we're talking like 12 hours of work has gone into this painting. And for some that might not be a lot. For some that may be, because there are, you know, people work at different paces. So I have 12 hours invested. Am I committed to this painting? Let's say I did something to this painting that ruined it. I mean, just ruined it. And, you know, would I be upset? Yeah, of course I would be upset. But, you know, okay, we either fix it or toss it. Basically is what it comes down to. So if you're not happy with your painting, don't feel like you're stuck with a painting that is not any good because you put all this time and effort into it, and you're afraid to go in and fix it or change it. Or let's say, for example, you want to add something to it. You think, oh, you know what? Maybe if I put this in there, maybe that'll add a little bit more interest. Don't be afraid to not do that because you think it might ruin your painting. So you gotta get over the idea that that you're stuck with this painting because of all the hours you put into it. Like, and I know how you would feel. You know, it's like it becomes near and dear to your heart, and you know, if you were to ruin it, it would almost seem like, oh, you know, all my time is, you know, wasted. I understand that feeling, it's a tough thing to get over as an artist. So you can't be committed to your paintings. You got to be willing to, let it go. There have been paintings where I have put this much time into a painting, 10, 12 hours or more, and then I've taken the titanium white and I have gone completely over the whole thing and started all over from scratch. I have done that. Do I like doing that? No, I do not. I always try and strive to make every painting that I'm working on my masterpiece. You always want it to be your masterpiece. The next masterpiece your masterpiece is the next painting you're working on. A lot of artists always say, and I don't feel any different. So you got to be willing to do that sort of thing, and I think it helps. I think it you got to remember it's not the painting that you're invested in, it's the process. So did you learn something while you were doing this? And if you learn something and you can apply that to your next painting, then I think everything worked out for the best. So yeah, each and every painting you should be learning something. And in this painting, there was actually no exception to that. There was a lot of things that I learned about this painting. Like, for example, when I go in there and I work on the reflection, I had to do that because I will be doing a lot of paintings in the future, as well as paintings that I've done in the past, but there will be a lot I'll be doing in the future with reflections in the water. And if I just, if I'm just satisfied with the reflections in the water the way they are right now, the way we're seeing them right now, then that's kind of how I'm going to end up painting the next one. Because I'll be like, well, it was okay on this one, it'll be the same for the next one. And that's not how I actually feel. I actually want to make those reflections a true reflection of what it is that's reflecting into the water. In order to do that, I'm going to have to paint over it. I already painted this area, and now I'm going to have to go over it. And is there a chance that I could ruin this painting by doing that? Yes. Yes, there is. Am I willing to take that chance? Yes. Yes, I am. So that's what I'm going to do. And so it's just, and the other thing I wanted to do with this is I wanted to attack that water, not with a regular brush. I actually wanted to use the palette knife. It's just in my mind, I'm thinking the palette knife will give me a better effect of reflections in the water. Now, whether that's true or not, I am not going to know until I try it. So that's what I end up doing here, is I actually take the palette knife and I scrape over those areas with the palette knife with some paint and make those reflections. And using the edge of the palette knife actually worked out to my benefit as far as setting up the edges of the buildings that are reflecting the water. Because like, if you'll notice right now, on the right hand side, the biggest building on the right, the very right, if you look at its reflection in the water, there is no definitive edge of that building being reflected in the water. And that's what I'm talking about when I say a true reflection. So in that particular case, I can take the edge of the palette knife and hold it up to the edge of that building and then come straight down and then apply that palette knife to the canvas and then scrape across to the right, and then that would give me an edge that would match the building itself. At least in my mind, that's how I was thinking. Whether or not that's actually going to work, I'm not going to know until I try it. So here I am putting in those details I was talking about at the beginning of the video, how the water had a lot of rocks and areas of grass, and like that area in the middle there where it comes out, there was like some, the water kind of eroded a little area there, and there was a lot of dirt and grass and ground. and rocks in there, so I wanted to make sure I added those in there because it just looked very plain. So if you looked at those areas after you looked at the focal point and then your eye came down, there's nothing for you to look at in the water to see. There's no interest there. So that's what I was doing there, adding that information in there. And basically, I just kept going back and forth. Like I said, I would stop, give my eyes a break for a while from this particular painting, and then I would come back and look at it again and realize, this area needs to be worked on, or this area over here. And every time I came back to it, I just would see more. And that brings up the next thing that a lot of artists have an issue with, is how do you know when you're done with your painting? Because like I said, you could step away from a painting, come back to it, and you'll say, oh, I see this area needs work, or oh, I see this. It would be never ending. You would always be constantly looking at it and saying, oh, this needs to be fixed, or this could be better. Or you truly are never done with a painting. What ends up happening is you choose at some point to abandon the painting. That's when you make that decision that you are done. That you feel that you cannot contribute any more to this painting. Like if you were to add something else, would it benefit the painting in any way? Would it make that painting a better painting? If the answer is no, if you put a spot on that painting and you don't feel like that's going to change that painting drastically enough where it would say you'd be able to say that it was an improvement, then you're done. That's when you make that decision to abandon the painting. Basically, you're abandoning it, because like I said, you are never truly ever done with the painting. You could always go back and add more. Always. There's always something. Or you can even you can add something that's not even there. You might say, oh, maybe a tree. Our favorite TV personality, Bob Ross, he used to do that all the time. If you remember in his videos, he would say, oh, there'd be a little tree going right across here, and he'd paint that in. Yeah, sorry about that. My camera actually shut down on me on that, so we're back and continue talking about what I was doing here. So I oiled that area in to help me blend my colors between the mountains and the sky. It kind of gave me that wet on wet to work with. So I started putting in some gray, and I was going to, you can see I'm dipping a little bit into the top of those mountains with that gray to kind of help me blend between the tops of those mountains and the sky. And I think it helped a little bit, or the idea that I had, to work that wet on wet, putting oil down first, I think it helped in this particular situation. But I'm not 100% sure if, had I just gone over it with just gray without putting oil down first, I'm not really 100% sure if that would have been better. I'm not going to know that because I already put the oil down and tried it this way. So, but here you can see I did purple up that mountain a little bit more. So you're constantly doing a game where you're playing back and forth with your colors and your values, testing things out, seeing what's going to work best. And I was very happy with doing this. It's not quite as dark of a purple as the mountain in the very background. So there is there's a distinct difference between the two mountains, and that I like that. So I felt it gave it more interest, and I was quite happy with that. So, and I was going to work on the water and those reflections. So here I am doing the same thing. I'm oiling that up, and when you do that, be careful that you don't go crazy with the oil. The oil because oil, I believe this was a linseed oil that I was using. It was not any other, it wasn't like liquid. You could use liquid for the same purpose, but this was just regular linseed oil from Winsor & Newton, and you got to be careful because the linseed oil comes out of the bottle kind of thick. So I did thin it up a little bit with some solvent. If you go on too thick with the oil, then it defeats the whole purpose of what you're trying to do. It'll have a difficult time drying. So you gotta be careful when you're applying the oil before you put your paints back on there. You always remember you gotta do that lean over thick, and the reason that exists is because of how things dry. So you did I say lean over thick? Thick over lean. Thick over lean is what it is, and it's because obviously you do not want the paint on the surface drying before the paint underneath, and so you always want to start with a thicker paint, and you always want to start with I'm getting it screwed up. You always want to start with a thinner paint and then go thicker as you go over each layer, and that is because you want the paint on the bottom to dry before the paint on the top. If the paint on the top dries first, it will crack, and that's the whole purpose behind that. So you don't want any crackage, paint cracking. And so if you put oil on there and then paint over the top of that, and you put it, you don't put the right consistency, you could end up with that problem. So here I am doing some more work on the foliage on the other side. It was a little flat, so I wanted to add a little interest to that. So that's what I was doing there. And I was playing with the permanent yellow green and the cerulean blue and the ultramarine blue to give me different variations of that green. Obviously the ultramarine blue would make it a very dark green, and the cerulean blue made it it would also make it a dark green, but not quite as dark as the ultramarine blue. And depending on, I would add a little bit of the cadmium yellow and lemon yellow to give me different highlights of that green. And you want to stay away from the titanium white for your highlights, only because it will tend to make your painting chalky. So in some areas that's actually a good thing, but in this particular case I wanted to keep the foreground grass and the grass over to the right a little bit more crisp in the color range, in those greens. So I was careful with my titanium white. I don't believe I added any on the foreground, and very little, if any, on the grass on the across the other side of the water. And if you remember, I said I was going to purple up that grass in the distance on the left-hand side, and so I'll be doing that here shortly, adding some purple into there. And again, I'll be darkening those buildings onto the right. So you can see in the change in the light, where I am, it's either later in the day or the next day that I'm working on this, and that's why that light is changing. So here I am coming down with my palette knife, matching up to the edge of that building, and then coming down and applying it in the water to mimic that edge that it's reflecting. And I thought that was a very effective way of doing it. I liked the effect it gave in the water, and I will definitely try to utilize my palette knife for reflections more so in the future, because it just makes a nice effect. It gives me the look that I'm looking for. So that's what I'm doing there. And if you'll notice, I'm using a variation of yellow ochre here, and that particular color is slightly darker than the buildings above it. And like I had said before, you know, you want to make sure that your reflections are a darker value than what it is that they're reflecting. So that's the only reason I'm doing that. And prior to putting those buildings in, you'll notice I did make that water bluer. It's a darker blue than what it's reflecting in the sky. So it may not show it that well in the video, but that is actually the case. So here I'm trying to add that color for the shrubbery that's above the wall there, and you know, just trying to make it reflect in the water what's actually above it. And near the very end, what I ended up doing is I ended up adding that wall, because you know, it's funny when you're painting, you're so concentrated on one particular area, you forget another area. And in this case, I actually forgot to add that wall that would be reflecting in there. Yeah, so this was a nice effect. I was very pleased with how this came out. Basically, the blue of the water, because I put that paint fresh over the top of that water that was already dry. So I actually dipped my brush in some solvent, some turpentine, and then I went across horizontal, and it brought that blue from the water underneath. So it actually, I really love the effect it made on the water. I think it gave it like a true reflection look, that effect that you're looking for. You know, when something's in the water, you know, it kind of gives like a some rippling effect. So it looks like the water is moving. It's not just completely still. In which case, this water was moving. And so here I am putting that purple color in that grass. So that was it gives that atmosphere. That grass makes it a little bit more distant, and I really like the way that looked. It's not that way in the photo. It was just something that I felt that I think it just enhanced the painting, in my opinion. So I was very pleased with the way that came out. And here I am adding those taller reeds of grass, and I'll be putting some flowers in there, and yeah, I think it really helped. So all in all, I was very pleased with how this came out. This painting is done. It's ready to go into a frame. And as always, all my paintings are for sale. If this is a painting that you'd be interested in, do not hesitate to let me know. Leave a comment down below. If there's anything that you like or not like about this video, make sure you leave that in the comment section down below. If you are not subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification and become a subscriber. And I appreciate everybody that has been watching my videos, and I will try to bring you more interesting videos in the future. So until then,